Hi, this is John from PythonBeginners.com, taking you through my Python Essentials free course at PythonBeginners.com. So today we're looking at the second lesson, which is lists in this video. And so a list is essentially a variable that can hold a list of things like words or numbers. And I think the best way to illustrate lists is to just go to the idle prompt and or the shell rather, and give you some live examples that are based on the ones I show on my website. So on my website I refer to an example called students, and if I go students equals 2 square brackets, that's my way of telling Python that this particular variable is going to be a list. And I can fill this list right away with some initial people if I want to, so I'll do that. So I'm going to have 4 students who I'm going to call Bob, Mary, Sue, and Joe. Alright, so I'll just press enter and execute that, and I can verify that students is in fact a list of students, 4 people. Now if I wanted to look at an individual student, I can actually zero in on them by going students and providing some location. Okay, now here's where people get a little bit confused. Watch this. I'm going to say give me students 2 and press enter. So what I got back might have been surprising for a few of you. Students 2 you would think would be Mary because she's the second one in the list, but the way that lists work in Python and a lot of other languages is they're zero based, meaning that the location numbers start at 0. Okay, so here on my website I show you kind of a up close illustration of that. So here's my list and here's the way Python sees it. So Bob is in location 0 of students, Mary is 1, Sue is 2, and Joe is 3. A lot of beginners who work with lists, they often forget that they start at 0, but once you get used to that, working with lists can be pretty easy. Okay, so now we have a list. There's a couple of things we can do. For example, we can add to a list and we can remove from a list. So let's take a look at some examples of both of those. So going back to my shell here for a second. Where is it? There we go. So if I wanted to add somebody to the list, I can use the append method. So students.append, and so I'm going to add Cindy to my list. And what append does is it basically adds a student to the end of the list. Okay. I can also add a student at a specific location. So say I want to add Gary where Mary is right now. Okay, so remember Mary's in location 1 given that Bob's in 0. So if I use the insert method, students.insert, and I give location 1, and at location 1 I'm going to insert Gary. Okay, so if I press enter on that and I type students, you can see Gary is in location 1 and everybody has been shifted over 1 to the right from that point on. Alright, so that's a couple of ways that you can insert. Let's take a look very quickly at removing. So I'm going to show you 2 techniques as well for removing, the pop technique and the remove technique. Okay, so going back into my idle shell here, if I wanted to just take somebody off the end of the list, the easiest way to do that is to go students.pop. And if I do that, Cindy gets removed from the list. Notice that this isn't a silent remove, meaning that when I execute the pop command, idle responds by sending me back a copy of the item that it removed. So it's just sort of a way to confirm that that's who got removed, and I get it back as a response. But she's definitely not in the list anymore. So if I go students, right here, I'll try that again, students, you can see that Cindy is gone. I can also pop at a specific location. So I can say students.pop location 3. Okay, so hopefully you can guess that Sue is the one that's going to be removed because she's in 0, 1, 2, 3. Alright, so Sue's been removed and sent back as a confirmation. If I type students now, Sue is gone. Now if I'm trying to remove somebody and I don't know where they are in the list, like say it's a list of say thousands and thousands of different students, and I know Gary's in there somewhere, I just don't know where, I can use the remove, students.remove Gary, and that will remove Gary. But notice with remove I don't get a confirmation that Gary's been removed. The only way I know for sure is if I go like this and just replay the list and make sure that Gary's gone. So there's a little bit of a difference in the behavior between pop and remove. Alright, now another thing you should know about remove is that if there was more than one Gary, for example, in the list, remove would only remove the first one that it found. So I can illustrate that. If I wanted to go students.append Bob, So I'm going to add Bob again into the list. So Bob is really in there twice now. Okay, he's at position 0 and position 3. So now if I use the remove method, students.remove Bob, okay, that will remove a Bob, but it'll remove the first one that it finds. Okay, so the original Bob that was way back here is gone, and the new Bob, because he was at the end of the list, is still there. All right, so there's a couple ways to remove, and just a few things that you need to know about the ways that you can remove from a list. What are some other things you can do with a list? Well, another thing you can do is you can find things in a list. So if you have a big list, it would be really handy to be able to find things. I'm going to show you 2 ways that you can look for something in a list. So going back to my list here, let me try this way. Students dot index Bob. So what index will do is it'll return the location where Bob is found. Now if Bob isn't in the list, or for example, say I look for Fred, because Fred's not in the list, I'm going to get back an error message. Okay, so it comes back and basically says Fred is not in the list. Now another way we can confirm whether something's in a list or not is using the in statement. So if I go like this, Fred in students, okay, really I'm asking a question mark, is Fred in students? Now I don't actually put a question mark in there. Python knows I'm asking yes or no, is Fred in there? If I press enter, I'm going to get back a false. If I ask for Bob, of course, I'll get back true because Bob is in the list. Now one thing to notice again about the index is if I have more than one Bob, it's only going to return the first Bob that it finds. Just kind of like when we did remove, it just removes the first one that it finds. So it doesn't do a count or remove all the Bobs, it just removes the one that it finds first. Okay, so besides looking for students, searching them in different ways, inserting, removing, there's a few other things I want to cover in this lesson about lists. One of them being sorting. So sorting is actually quite easy with the Python list. So there's my students right now. I've only got 3 of them. Let me add another student. So I'm going to go students.insert right at the beginning. So in position 0, so that's going to be at the very front of the list, a student named Zoe. Okay, so now I've got at least 4 students so that when you see the sort, you'll see that it does a really good job. So if I want to sort this, students.sort. Okay, and we don't know for sure if anything happened, but if I type in students again, you can see that the list has been sorted. Okay, so it's a very quick and easy way to do that. If I want to know how many students are in my list, I can use the len command. So if I go len and send in a list of some sort, like len students, it gives me back 4. So that's also a really handy thing to know if you want to just know how big your list is. Another thing that is a little bit confusing at the beginning is getting back partial lists. Okay, so here's an example here on my website of the different ways you can just get part of a list back. So in this first example, when I provide 2 numbers with a colon in between to separate them, I'm saying give me in the list everything from 3 up to, but not including 8. So this will be 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. If I provide just one number, like 5 colon, I'm saying from position 5 to the end, give me everybody that's in the list. Going the other way, I can have a colon 3. So I'm saying start at the beginning, go up to but not including position 3, and give me everything in the list up until that point. Okay, let's try a few of these with our student list here. Now I've only got 4 students, so let me just quickly add another 3 students. I'm going to go student.append, and I'll do this 3 times. So I'll put Gary back in there. Okay, so I'm just going to copy. You can actually copy and paste commands if you want to save some time. So I'm going to go Control-C or Command-C on a Mac and then paste it here. And I'm going to add also Bill, and I'm going to add Cindy. All right, so now let's take a look at my list one more time. Whoops, students, there we go. Notice too, when I add the new students, the way append works is it always adds it to the end. So even though I previously sorted it, that sort order is no longer maintained because everybody that gets appended just goes to the end. Now, of course, I can easily sort my list again. So if I go students.sort, and then I go students, there's my student list sorted one more time. So now that I've got a bit of a bigger list, I'm going to use the partial list examples to show you how that works. So say I wanted to just extract Bob, Cindy, and Gary. So what I would do is say students starting at location 1, because that's where Bob is, ending, colon, at location 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I want to put 4 because 4 is where Joe is, but 4 is the first location that's not included in the list. Okay, so sure enough, Bob, Cindy, and Gary. Say I wanted Joe to the end. So Joe is in location 4. So if I go students and I provide a 4, colon, and then leave the end blank, it'll just go right to the end of the list. So I should get back Joe, Mary, and Zoe. All right, and it works from the front of the list as well. So say I just want Bill and Bob, I can go students from location 0, from the beginning rather, to location 2. Okay, so I'll just go blank 2, and that'll just give me Bill and Bob. Okay, so there's different ways that you can extract part of a list if you just want not the whole thing. All right, so we're going to finish with a sample program. So I wrote this ahead of time in Python, and I copied and pasted it to my website. But if you go to the website, you can actually get the source code if you want to as well and copy and paste it, or you can just type it out, or you can just watch me run this code because it saves a little bit of time if the code's there already. So let me just paste this into an idle program window. All right, and I'm going to save it as madlib. So I'm just going to file save it really quickly here. And let me just run it a couple times and you can get a feel for what this program actually does. So F5 is how you run the program, and I swung the hat. Okay, let me try that again. I pet the ball. Every time I run this, I get a random goofy sentence. I pet the hat. So you get the idea. Whoops, let me just try that one more time. I pet the ball. It likes to do petting a lot. Let me try one more just to see if I get something a bit more random. I fed the tree. There you go. So how does this program work? Well, I'm using two lists here. I've got a list of things and a list of verbs. And what I'm doing is picking a random thing, which is just a random number from 0 to 4, and a random verb. So these two things here are basically just random numbers. And you saw in the original lesson on variables how random numbers work. We import random as r, and here I'm saying let r be a random integer between 0 and 4. Why did I pick 0 to 4? Because those are the locations in both of these lists. Cat is 0, tree is 4. Fed is 0, swung is 4. So once I have a random thing number and a random verb, I can just use that as a location in my verbs list and in my things list. So I something the something. So it's going to pick a verb at a random location, the, and then a thing at a random location. Okay, so that works quite well. Now, upon further research, here's a neat thing that you can do in Python that is a little different than what I've seen in other languages. So that random object R also has a really neat ability called choice, where you just send in the list itself and it just randomly picks a random thing from the list without having to actually do random numbers. So let me show you that by just copying this last line here and pasting it down below. Okay, so rather than verbs random verb, I'm going to use my random object R with the choice command. Okay, so check this out. R.choice, and then I'm going to plug in just the list verbs. Okay, so I don't need variables for random numbers. I can just go R.choice, plug in the list, and it'll pick something random. I'll do the same thing over here. I'll say R.choice things. So R.choice things. Okay, so this is another way of doing the exact same thing. So it's a very handy way to just pick a random thing from a list using the choice option from random R rather than randint and plugging in a random number. So let me run this one more time, and you'll see that I'm going to get two sentences now, one using the first technique and one using the second one. So I'll just run this one more time and save it. Okay, and I swung the mug twice. Well, let me try that again. There we go. So I fed the ball and I swung the ball. Okay, so it is giving me a random result each time. And sometimes it's very similar and sometimes it's identical, but just so that you know, both of these are doing the same thing but using different techniques. All right, so that wraps it up for my lesson on lists. It is worth noting, though, that there are many more things about lists that we didn't cover in this lesson, simply because there's other topics in Python that we have to cover in order to come back to those. So if you do follow through with some more of my lessons here, especially when we get into ifs and loops, and even dictionaries and functions. All of these have ways to work with lists as well, so we'll probably use more list examples when we get to these other lessons, but for now that's a pretty good introduction to lists. So this is John again from pythonbeginners.com, thanking you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you back for lesson 3, strings. Bye for now.